Okay. Great. Well, thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to share some of our experiences with farmer field schools and forestry-related areas. I'm Stephen Sherwood. I'm talking today from our farm here in the highlands of Ecuador. The farm is Granja Urcuhuayco. I work with Eco Rural. I'm a member of Groundswell International, as well as Wageningen University. And I really want to talk today about enabling endogenous potential. I'm going to focus on the experience of field schools as an example. The outline follows why farmer field schools, that farmer field schools are the solution, and what is the problem. What is a field school for the people who have not heard about them or have not had experience with them directly? I'm going to give a few examples of experiences in farming field schools applied to forestry and forestry-related areas. And I want to end with a few notes on our pressing challenges today, particularly with regard to the institutionalization of knowledge-based, people-centered development practice. Why farmer field schools? Kindly let me help you, else you will drown, said the friendly monkey as he picked up the fish and placed her into the tree. What is the problem here? A lot of development work is about encounters between people from different cultures and conflicts between those people. And field schools are designed to create a platform that'll help us bring those people together, help them understand one another, and to sort of mediate their differences so that they can advance their common interests. Why field schools? Well, for one, we have an ongoing conflict in modern agriculture between technologically centered development versus people-centered development. Field schools are very much about empowering people and enabling endogenous potential. Okay, sort of helping people to lay people, non-experts normally, farmers, the family working in rural areas, to become active agents, right, in their present and their future. And it's basically about building common understanding, okay, and how people can understand what they do, why they do it, work together to advance their common agenda. Meanwhile, technology-centered development is really focused on getting people to do what they're not already doing. It's a very different dynamic. It's not entirely wrong or bad, okay, but it's a different tradition, and it's something we feel that we need to break out of. And in particular, it's because of this concern over paternalism, dependence, and organized irresponsibility. Modern agriculture, okay, and modernization in agriculture and food has brought in and created the outsider, right? The person, and it creates a sense of paternalism. For example, in this case of this pesticide salesperson in the Northern Andes, where people become very dependent on asking these so-called experts for solutions. And it ends up restricting sort of people's liberty, okay, their expression, and they become reliant on others. And the reason why we're concerned about this is, one, because people from outside don't always understand local conditions. And the other one is because the people who make decisions do not necessarily live the consequences of those decisions. And what that means is when something goes wrong, what do we do? Okay. And who is held accountable? There's a sense of learned helplessness, okay, in modern development. And Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator, talked about 4 levels of awareness: magical awareness, naive awareness, critical awareness, and so-called fanatical awareness. And he was all about creating critical awareness. People who had the ability to analyze the cause and effect relationships of any given situation. They were capable of observing, okay, and listening very well, capable of empathy, that were confident yet self-critical. And that is really the goal of where we're going to in farmer field schools. What is a farmer field school? Well, it's based on the notion that how we teach can be as important as what we teach. The goal of a farmer field school is to help people develop confidence, to become competent, creative, inspired, and organized. The means is ecological literacy, which I'll talk about, this question of critical awareness, and group solving or problem solving. The facilitator commonly is another farmer who has gone through a field school and has been trained, often with technical backstopping. It can also be an external person who lends his or her services to help get a field school going in a particular area. The process involves 10 or 20 participants, okay, that analyze a context and that choose an entry point. Usually it's a crop, it's an animal, it can be a tree, and they work together to do a needs assessment and to determine a curriculum. Okay, and a curriculum focuses on sort of the phenological stages of a crop. Okay, and the field school takes place over a season and an annual. Farmers can experience a tree from soil preparation to nurseries to planting, all the way to harvest and utilization. The classroom is not done inside of walls. It's done in the field, as we see in this photograph. It's done in the forest, okay? And there's a lot of work with comparisons, okay? And in the field, we conduct experiments, both for strategic purposes for learning, but also open-ended experiments that allow farmers, participants, to sort of explore their ideas and to test their ideas. Every week or 2 weeks, or with forestry, sometimes once a month, there's an encounter where we do discovery-based learning, okay? And we're constantly looking at continual ecosystem analysis, okay, in the context of the field. And we touch upon a special topic identified by the people. The facilitator unfolds, okay, during this particular session. And there's group dynamic activities. Now, when we talk about discovery-based learning, okay, the fundamental part about discovery-based learning is that individual experience is extremely important. And it's important for people to learn on their own, okay, but in a group setting where they're always debating and discussing with others. Okay, but the notion is that learning empowers, that it enables, okay, and cooperative learning can empower collectively. And it's a very evolutionary process, and that every individual and group's experience is unique. And that uniqueness is extremely important, okay, for them to be able to understand their own context and to manage their own styles and personalities so that they can utilize that experience for different purposes. Ecological literacy, farmers learn what they don't, okay, learn what they don't constantly understand on their own. Jeff Bentley famously said, "What farmers don't know cannot help them." We don't wish to romanticize, okay, farmers. We don't think they know everything. There's certain areas, when we look at epistemology of farmers, we find that ease of observation, okay, and perceived importance are very related. And there are these deep areas where farmers have very sophisticated knowledge and taxonomies and very nuanced explanations of phenomena. For example, the reproduction of cattle or bees, or questions of local phenology. They often have more nuanced understandings than even scientists. But there are these other areas of things that are very difficult to see because of size, because of questions of scale, because of mobility. Okay, where farmers and rural people really don't have a taxonomy. They don't have words for things. They don't have clear, logical explanations. And a farmer field school tries to focus on these areas that are empty and these areas that are sort of thin to help farmers fill those knowledge gaps and to create new explanations. And the goal is so that they can innovate, but with much more clarity and much more purpose. The hallmark of a successful field school is creativity. Okay, and this is key. When I go to visit a field school, I want to see things that I've never seen before. I want to hear things I've never heard before. And when you have that element of creativity, you know something is right. This is not just technology transfer, but a very generative process is underway. So we conducted a stock taking this year, and I want to share some notes from that with you. So field schools started in 1989, okay, in Rice, in integrated pest management in Indonesia. And since that time, okay, over about 35 years, they've diversified and they've reached new regions, okay. In all, we think about 15 to 19 million people have graduated from field schools. And you'll see over time that a lot of people have entered areas such as community forestry, fruit management, landscape management, other aspects of forestry and forestry-related areas. We identified about 200,000 field school graduates in FFS-forestry from 17 countries. And in several countries, or a number of countries, they were extremely influential, okay? We found strong forestry experiences in Honduras, in India, Indonesia, Kenya, among other countries. Themes included fruit tree and plantation management, dryland woodlots and pastoral systems, agroforestry, soil conservation, agriculture and climate change adaptation and mitigation, okay, were also included, as well as community forestry management, particularly in India, identified in Nepal, some very interesting projects. Now, there's unique challenges when we go from an annual crop like rice to a perennial such as forestry. The life cycle of trees are very different. So as I mentioned earlier, they have to work with chronosequencing. We found unique knowledge gaps. There's much less information about forestry pests, for example, or details about fertilization and plant responses, or the nature of the forestry soils than there is in agriculture. Forests are much more complex. There's many more individuals, there's more diversity. The way that humans live in forests, often in small migratory nomadic groups, makes it very difficult. And sometimes field schools, the classic field school is not extremely appropriate for those settings. And power disparities in the forest, the vulnerabilities of forest dwellers, and unique forms of corruption and violence that we haven't experienced in agriculture. We have other forms of violence, trust me, but it's a very different context. So there's a lot to learn. And as you see in this diagram, that goes from sort of agriculture, the agroecology, agroforestry, permaculture, all the way to a native forest. The majority of experiences were in this area of sort of agroforestry, the interface between annual farming and sort of more perennial systems. So I'm just going to show you a few slides of a couple of experiences in forestry field schools. Here's some taken from Ecuador, which is where I'm from, where I had photographs. We found rich experiences in agroforestry, coffee production, cacao production, different fruit trees. It's a group from the Amazon. This is Don Ramon, a friend of ours who did spectacular work around mangoes. We found exciting experiences in soil health and regenerative agriculture. For example, farmers going to the field to study how soils function, ecologies of soils function in the forest. We isolated, for example, white fungi. We reproduced them in bioreactors in some field schools. And they did experiments on how do you take sort of total till systems, convert them to zero tillage, constant cover systems of high biodiversity, and to learn about the advantages of that. So it's basically applying the principles of soil management in the forest to annual production in agriculture, which has all kinds of advantages. We found experiences in post-conflict resolution and rural reconstruction, in this case, among groups in the Amazon of Colombia, working together to repopulate native trees in their native areas where they grew up as a form of peace and reconciliation. We found forestry schools, again in Colombia here, of resettlement of displaced peoples who were basically given a desert. They came from a jungle, were given a desert and had to reforest it again. And experiences in landscape management. People, in this case, they built a 3D model to sort of analyze different aspects of the watershed, micro and macro, to identify areas of vulnerability and to design intervention programs as part of their field school experience. So I want to end this talk talking about some pressing challenges, particularly with regard to institutionalization. Field schools have been around for over 35 years with, let's say, perhaps 19 million graduates, okay? And if you look at this sort of model of institutionalization, which is kind of constant convergence of institutional norms, breaking out of them and creating new institutions, field schools have broken out of this modern agricultural cycle, created new possibilities through all kinds of charisma and new ways of doing, people-centered development, but they haven't yet been successfully brought into like the norms of development practice for a number of reasons, but largely because of resistance, okay? So there are these challenges going on, is how can we help field schools, people-centered development, become more of a norm in development practice? Well, first off, some of the challenges we have are introducing new themes to agriculture. For example, carbon sequestration and climate change mitigation, not just adaptation. And how can we utilize insights from the forest and perennials into strengthening production of annual agriculture, particularly of agroecology, in ways where farms become not a source of atmospheric carbon, but rather a sink of atmospheric carbon. This is a very important theme that we're trying to push right now across the global environment with field schools. We have challenges of new leadership, of how do we get women into leadership roles at field schools, youth, and how do we work with generation learning in field schools and innovation. And we have major problems with quality, both people who might commit to field schools, but how to adapt them from annuals to perennials. And the performance of being a field school facilitator and a participant is often very challenging. There's always challenges with the diversification of themes of field schools and inserting themselves in multiple aspects of forestry, forest life, and skilling. How do we reach new geographies, new contexts, cultural contexts to conduct field schools? And at the same time, we're constantly experiencing from sort of the technocentric, expert-led development world co-option, a technical rendering of social processes, let's say curriculums that are designed in the capital or at the NGO headquarters and not in the field, and translation, okay, where a lot of the processes like the agroecosystem analysis is so controlled by the technical people that field schools are pulled from a people-centered model, like we have here in this photograph, back into sort of an expert-centered approach, and ends up looking a lot like technology transfer. So those are some of the challenges we're facing with field schools. I want to thank you for listening. My name is Stephen Sherwood, and I hope this is not the last time that we have a chance to meet, and I hope you come visit us here in Garanjo or Cohueco in the Ecuadorian highlands.